see it happen.
Outstanding. Well, Homesteader Shelby Hurd here has got something for us. I don't know, maybe you can look this up if I go through the next article here on
Yeah,
Epoch
sure.
Time. UK intel agencies frame Spygate involvement ahead of Trump's D-class. And maybe that, I don't know, do you also happen to see last night the Fox clip that had Meadows and Sarah Carter and Hannity by chance? I think it was only maybe about 3-4 minutes long, something like that, talking about the impending D-class.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's from all over the place now. It's too many singing the same tune, if you may, right? That to me, it spells eminent, because it's the same. It's not necessarily from the same source, but it's coming from. I've seen it from multiple people now. Solomon Carter, who's been pretty much on the money, and for them to start saying a time frame, Meadows, Nunes going out, basically calling out, saying, "Hey, let's start talking about UK's role in this, foreign intel's role in this."
Mm,
And
interesting.
And of course, now the aspect of, as you can see, the stuff that Bongino's been coming out with, and again saying that his good intel is telling them that the D classes, that Trump is basically setting that up for the D class anytime now.
Yep. So. Yeah, it'd be awful nice if they actually dropped it here today, tomorrow, and then have the whole long weekend to ruminate over that and allow the Mockingbird media to see how exactly they are going to counter that.
Correct.
Now, the drawback to that obviously is knowing what they do, what sort of distraction are they going to try and pull in order to take our eyes away from it. And this being a long weekend would be a ripe opportunity, unfortunately, for any sort of false flag type event.
Right. So heads on a swivel, people all around. The interesting part about the timing, as you said, not only the aspect of letting it stew to see how they can react. I wonder how much is going to come out through the Twitter sphere of it coming down, like say a Collins or a Meadows or a Nunes that have considerable following, let alone POTUS's. Maybe more or less the POTUS handle rather than the real Donald Trump handle, putting it out there, right, as getting people to get exposure to it. But one thing, if I may, and you've heard me say this and others have, the way I look at the D class is it's evidence. It in itself, it's not going to say Comey's guilty, kind of thing. What it's going to show is the signatories, unless they redact the names, but we've already seen them from the under-redacted versions of the FISA as to who signed off. That is going to give you implications of the guilty or the liars, if you may, because they're supposed to assert everything in there is true. But it's going to tell you what they used as evidence to lie to the fisc, or the lie that they told the fisc, put it a different way. It's when the OIG comes behind that it's going to be the coup d'etat, right, or the coup de grace, so to speak. Sorry, in what really is going to start naming names.
Yep. Let me get back here. Somebody in chat was just saying, where did it go? I just scrolled right past. Today is the day, according to Roseanne Barr, according to Tammy Taylor. You remember yesterday on our show when I went through the notables, somebody had put something in there about Barr and Roseanne, and I said, I wonder what the heck this is about.
Correct.
I wonder if that's a reference to that.
Well, interestingly enough, tomorrow is the end of the D4 interval, right? per the decode, to see if that's one person's guesstimate as to what Q has been telling us. But it's the pulse is there, right? We've had people say, D class is coming before, right? Individuals and stuff. But do you recall at any given point in this whole show where you have all the white hats kind of singing the same tune as to a win. I mean, you got the prominent players, the Meadows, the Nunes, the on the media front, the Hannitys, the Ingrams, the Bonginos, the Solomons, the Carters, all of them kind of saying any day now.
Right.
So to me, that says it may not be any day, but it's certainly not any month.
Right. Well, and the other thing too, the whole C versus D, which you kind of described in yesterday's show. If you didn't see us on We the People Insider yesterday, I'd encourage you to go back on our channel over there and pick up yesterday's episode. Homesteader, you went through the whole C before D and what that meant. Originally we thought that meant Comey, but I think as we look back upon that, maybe it meant Collins and this trove of information that he dropped, which would put us right on par with the D-class. I mean, literally just around the corner.
Correct. Yeah, and it could still very well be Comey involved, but not in an aspect. I mean, in kind of like the misleading perspective, not disinfo, but misleading. And that somebody can say that's semantics, but in that Q drop, he put Comey in Killbox's focus brackets, if you may, right before he says C before D, which is a natural implication, a natural thought process to say, oh, he must be talking Comey. But before that, he asks if he asks in there, and before that, D-class before or after OIG, Comey before or after OIG. Right, leaving the ambiguity, and then he says C before D.
Right.
And what I saw was what Collins dropped, and again, hat tip to Lynn Juju for triggering me on this. But what Collins dropped is in essence what all those people said. Now picture what they said that's now been memorialized through the transcripts, and when the FISA D-class and the supporting media per POTUS saying he's going to D-class all of it. That's going to be basically allow you and I, figuratively speaking, to say, hey, wait a minute. XYZ said this, but the D-class says that. Who's going to win? What they said or what was given to the FISC? And then that's going to lead into the aspect of saying, okay, and indictment for you, criminal referral for you two.
There's definitely some timing around this, certainly, and Psychotic Ghost, I think, brings this up. FISA cannot be released until the polls close in the UK. GEODIS must not be seen as interfering in that election. And I think you're absolutely right, because these things do kind of go hand in hand with this thing. We've talked about this before. We've talked about it with Daddy Dragon. If you've followed us here or followed us when Daddy Dragon's on our show, either way, you know that there is an element of Brexit that comes to play. We talked about the fact that Theresa May is likely going to resign here very soon. We saw somebody out of her cabinet yesterday just resign and disgust with what's going on. And then I'm going to share this real quick. Daddy Dragon, I think, brought this up this morning. Let me go ahead and pull this up. I think he has this on his Twitter feed and says, breaking news, Facebook under criminal investigation in the UK for interfering with an election. And he highlights and points it directly to Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch, Robin Tilbrook, Real Donald Trump, Epoch Times. And this is a playbook, and that's what they're doing. We just saw this here not even a week ago in Italy with the stuff that's going on there as well, that we're getting interference run by the big tech corporations, Facebook, the Twitters, and the like, trying to sway elections. Highly illegal, but yet they're doing it anyway.
Yeah, and I can see that. I can see the aspect of, not on the...
speaking of Daddy Dragon.
I can see sorry, go ahead.
We have Daddy Dragon actually joining us. Maybe he'd like to give us a little color commentary on what he tweeted here this morning.
Well, thank you very much. Just to reiterate to people, what you just said is absolutely correct, that it is unlawful in this country. We have a law, and that law is the Representation of the People Act, People's Act. That states that you're not allowed, it's a criminal offence, if you interfere with a political party, their campaign, or their candidates, by making derogatory comments or do something that interferes. So it's a criminal offence, not a civil matter. Just to literally hone in on the point you just made about POTUS and declass. Technically, they could say that POTUS, by declassing today or before today, or the run up to this election, would have been interfering in the European elections, and he doesn't want to get involved with that. The day that stops is tomorrow, Friday, because after that, all the attacks on Robin Tilbrook and these other people, if it is what's known as libelous or slander, it reverts back to tort law on Friday. But if they've committed any of those libelous or slanderous or worse, in which case they have done to Robin Tilbrook, prior to today, that's a criminal offence as well as libelous and slanderous. Now, the effect that's going to have is, and again, I've mentioned this, my position is this, that Nigel Farage and POTUS are, in effect, side by side as two movements, not necessarily working together, but two movements. They're the same mentality in taking back control for the people. Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party and everything that's going on at the moment are under full attack. Robin Tilbrook is under full attack. The reason I sent that out was because we have a court case in the UK, the Royal Courts of Justice, that basically is so powerful, we know they've lost like that. Yeah, we know that for a fact. Last night, Andrea Leadsom resigned. Point 1 and 3 of the resignation letter backed our case. The first was that the European Union and the Brexit deal that Theresa May was offering people, shoving it down people's throats, basically was a loss of sovereignty. The person who did that before was a guy called Edward Heath, the previous Prime Minister. He traded our sovereignty, and he traded our sovereignty for a £300,000 yacht and some small boys. That's fact. He's dead. Yeah. There are other investigations that went on in this country. The point being, what Brake Inspector and what T.N. Homesteader have just been talking about is absolutely true. Tomorrow, you're going to get the first part of the declass. And what you're going to see is this country so horrified at what the British government, and there's a word for even if one of them out of cabinet ministers of 25 do something illegal, they have what's known as joint responsibility. And that means that they are all equally and severably liable for what they've done. i.e., if Theresa May knew at the top what was going on with President Trump and proceeded to enable these people to smear President Trump and interfere with the American elections, all of those in the cabinet are guilty, not just one. And the criminal term for that is joint enterprise, a conspiracy, basically. Whether or not you knew, in reference to the exact detail, is irrelevant. Point 3 of Andrea Leadson's resignation last night, quite simply, and this is all relating to the UK, and I'm going to come on to Devin Nunes in 2 seconds, guess what? Point 3 was that the government and the cabinet had not scrutinised legislation and laws involving Brexit well enough. She's actually admitting it. We know in the background that everybody in Parliament is aware of this court case, and they all know that we've won. That's why there's a media blockade. That's the first thing. Second, let's get on to a great truth teller. Literally, if you was to put someone second to President Trump, it would be Nunes. He actually come to the UK last year. he went to speak under official representation of Congress. He wanted to speak to MI6, MI5, GCHQ, as I understand it, the Home Office, the Commonwealth Office, and the Prime Minister to discuss these allegations. All of them told him to go away. Yeah, they didn't even give him the time of day. Now, what has happened? He's wrote a letter from Congress officially to say to POTUS, I need you to ask these questions of treasonous May. It is no surprise that that letter has come out today. It is, and I want the American audience to know this because this is crucial. What people are not aware of is 12 noon every day, Her Majesty the Queen gets a red box from the Cabinet. In that red box, it contains any other business. In that red box is Devin Nunes's questions to Her Majesty's government. And no, I'm not kidding you. That is the level. Nobody gets a free pass. Nobody walks away from this. And everybody is aware of the questions that Devin Nunes is asking, including the Queen of England, right? People don't realise how it works. But to the American people out there, let me tell you, she's already read it, right? She knows, her government knows, Treasonous May knows, and now they're in trouble because Devin Nunes wants them answers. President Trump must ask them questions because it comes from your Congress and it comes from a senator, people that have been elected, people that this country have attacked and abused your Constitution. This on its own is big enough to bring down the UK government. That's, if you want me to expand on that, I will, but just give me your thoughts on what I just said.
Well, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. One quick question, timing. What comes to mind is the article that came out that says MI5, MI6, and GCHQ were briefed on the dossier prior to POTUS seeing it. Now, if I put the timing in line, and the question, do you happen to know, and it's okay if you don't, was that briefing pre or post Nunes going over to England to meet with the respective parties? It sounds to me like it was Nunes was going there after they were briefed. It sounded to me. I don't have the timing. That's why I'm asking if you happen to.
The answer is the timeline is not known. But because of the briefing and we know that it's when the intelligence was passed over, allegedly, yeah. Right. Then right. It must have, that meeting and those conversations must have took place before Nunes come over.
Right. That would imply why they in essence says thank you but no thank you, because if they actually greeted him, then they would have to have lied.
Right. And the direct answer to your question is when Nunes come over, he's asking the exact same questions that he's just put the posters and still hasn't got an answer to. Yeah. So therefore, he is actually investigating and asking questions about that meeting and when did you know? So therefore, the meeting with the GCHQ and the heads took place well before Nunes come over, and now it's moved on to POTUS saying, right. Do you remember everyone talking about that the British have been out in America and want to have discussions and don't do the D-class methods and etc. That's the head of GCHQ before he resigned, right? When he came over. Yeah. Right. And bear in mind who his friend is. His friend is Brennan.
Exactly.
And also remember that Robert Hannigan, I believe that Robert Hannigan has already been indicted in this sealed indictment. And the reason I believe that is because he resigned 3 days after POTUS was took oath, inaugurated. And this is really important, and people often miss this. He made a statement that he was resigning because of personal reasons. His mum and dad weren't very well. His wife weren't very well. He'd only been in a job at the pinnacle of his career for 2 years. And then that statement was made in January 2017. Now, what you've got to remember is in February of this year, he then makes another statement and says, well, actually, this is the reason why I've resigned. And it was reported on. So we know he's already lied once. And the reason why he says, and this is crucial, that he resigned was because he gave a reference to a paedophile priest.
Right.
You bring up an interesting point around that, though, with Hannigan, though. If he would have been potentially indicted in January, shortly after POTUS took office, think of that for a second, okay? Huber wasn't even seated in Utah until late October, right around the time Q actually first came on the scene as an Anon in October 2017. Okay, and we didn't even catch wind, if you will, of these sealed indictments taking place, nor tracking them, if you will, until probably maybe December timeframe when we started to see upticks, major upticks, way above the norm by way of pacer.gov, and people started tracking this, right? So that tells me, okay, that in January, probably 2017, if Hannigan resigned due to a sealed indictment, we literally only had maybe about the first 3,000-4,000 indictments at that time. Now, mind you, well, if you remember back to the very early Q posts, who were the first couple that were indicted that we caught wind of? Do you remember?
According to Q, would have been Podesta and Aberdeen.
Absolutely. So we know back then that there were some very high-level players that were getting indicted, if that is indeed the case, within those first 3,000 to 4,000 indictments. If Hannigan's one of them, wow.
Right.
Exactly. And I firmly believe that they're more worried about what's good. When D-class happens, technically, there will be no reason not to keep that indictment against Robert Hannigan sealed. They, in effect, will unseal that indictment. When that happens, the British public will see how long this government, the media, and all involved have covered this up for. And once people focus on the cover-up, then the focus will move to what I believe is the real target, which is the hammer. And that's when everyone says, whoa, hold on, we're not accepting this. So I think it definitely is going to happen. And again, Robert Hannigan is key to this with a number of other individuals. And again, I note, and I'm trying to think of his name, top of the hill, John Solomon. He's also made an application to the High Court for a number of documents to be released to him.
Right.
That's very powerful. That on its own is, he's just delivered a knockout punch, because what we do know is that with POTUS and the Republicans winning the Senate, because the Senate is very important, they have approved a number of judges. And we are now looking at the Department of Justice being cleaned out, constitutionalist judges being put in place. And you've got more chance now of one of those judges or people coming through the ranks to hear these cases and to look at what the applications are. So again, you're seeing part of the plan. Remember, I've always said there's probably 3, possibly now 4, executive orders that were crucial to this plan. If you looked at the executive orders and pieced it together, you can see the lawfare in place. One other thing, and I just want to briefly touch on this. For the first time since 1984, aptly named, I may add, POTUS has actually changed the military code. And that change has enabled everyone to focus not just on this corruption and the mass of sealed indictments, but also using the military intelligence weapon against domestic and foreign enemies, because they can see what's happened. And people, once you actually see what they've done, this is all in defense of your constitution and the honest people in the United States of America. So you've got nothing to worry about. But let me tell you something. The nefarious people that are working in the background are in sheer panic.
So I agree with that last statement for certain, because you can see the reactions across, not just here in the States, but also in your neck of the world. Question, do you see the potential that on the D class that it excludes by redaction the implications of the UK government and continue to use it as leverage after the Brexit vote? Because in my opinion, I think that could still be a separation because it's still there. It can be redacted under the concept of, intelligence gathering methods, right? And still hold it as a big stick or hammer on the, all pun intended, on the UK government. Because until and this is the way I see it, Daddy, is because of this. Even if you have the vote tomorrow, there has to be execution thereafter. You had the vote back then, right? That's what you guys are fighting for now. That says effectively, by definition, you have already exited the EU. It's just the deep state that's kind of dragging it out, right?
Yeah.
So from that perspective, even if you have the vote tomorrow, that does not constitute execution. That constitutes the aspect of, hey, we've said it again, get out. But Brussels still has a tremendous control until you get Theresa May out of there, and a lot of the lords, and probably quite a bit of the House of Commons, right?
Well, there's two things I'll say to that. First of all, everything that's going on now in the UK, with reference to our court case, it is unlawful and void, right? So my argument to that is there's nothing. They have got no control over us whatsoever, apart from the deep state not telling people, believe it or not, that we've already left. Right, so that's a factual thing, and we've got High Court judges that are in agreement with us, or retired High Court judges that are in agreement with us. So the next point, just to say to you, this is covering the point you just made. There's a number of things going on here, and I can describe you the strategy if you want. The first thing I'll say to you is that the vote is today. That's why I'm confident that the first bucket...
My apologies. I thought it was tomorrow. Okay.
No, it's today, and it ends tonight at 10 p.m. tonight. So tonight, from 10 p.m. tonight, the election's over. From 10 p.m. tonight, D-class can be given, right? So with no interference whatsoever. No redactions are needed. The second thing I'll say to you is, I believe this is part of a strategic plan, and that is that the Brexit Party is literally got their that they've released their bonds, right? What I mean by that is there is no NEC. Nigel Farage and a number of other people, in my opinion, are strategizing with him to how they're going to take control of our parliament. because they must take control of the Parliament to then take control of the Department of Justice and the legal system and then the enforcement system, exactly the blueprint that...
yeah, it's the same as here, right?
Exactly. It's the same playbook, right?
Right.
To do that, once this election is over, then you get D-Class, then you get the Office of Inspector General reports. What you're going to see in very quick succession is the government and the Parliament in this country fold. It's going to collapse, and the reason it's going to collapse is because of the D-Class, because they can't keep it quiet anymore. Once that happens, they will then call a general election, and when they call that general election, this election is to do with the European Union. All it's doing is proving to those people that have been disillusioned, think of Trump, think of the people that have gone out and voted for Trump. Most of them haven't voted in years. That's going to have the same effect, and it's proving to the people, now your vote counts. Vote for the Brexit Party. That will happen, but this time in a general election, you're actually going to be voting for somebody, not necessarily Nigel Farage, but the Brexit Party, normal everyday people, to replace the cabal and the puppets within Parliament. Once that happens, then we can get rid of the layers of nefarious people in our justice system and our law enforcement system. So your equivalent at the moment, you've got a terrible situation with the leadership of the FBI, CIA, etc. We've got a serious problem with the leadership of Scotland Yard.
As usual, that's the case, right? The rank and file are usually not the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah, what I was thinking of is more or less, so you're, to put it a different way, you're aspiring to the aspect of D-Class being a MOAB from the UK perspective, the UK government, I mean. And versus where I was coming from was from the US perspective as a carpet bomb approach, in essence, D-Class without the UK involvement point to keep continued leverage over UK until the proper time. You're seeing it the other way because you see more leverage being applied to the post-Brexit vote or revote by the exposure of the leadership. Okay.
Exactly.
Hold that thought for a second. I want to come back around to that. This morning, obviously, there was an article, wee hours, says how Farage's Brexit party is destroying the UK political establishment. You can find that on Zero Hedge. I think that's absolutely right. Now,
sounds familiar. Just change the names.
Right. But here's what I want to square that against. Daddy Dragon, if you remember right, the other day I dropped an article from 2016 where Farage, while Trump was on the campaign trail, if you remember right, back in August 2016, Farage actually came down to Jackson, Mississippi for one of his rallies on the campaign trail.
A rarity, right? A rarity.
Rarity, right. It seemed a little bit out of place at the time, but it just makes you wonder, flash forward to where we're at now, was Farage potentially read into a plan that would lay the groundwork for all of these things to transpire leading up to this very point in time, to where the D-Class and all the stuff behind the scenes that took place can manifest itself now. Farage can come in on the Brexit party as laid out in this article here this morning. The vote takes place and FISA takes place, Brexit takes place, then Fed London.
I mean, that would be the case if the plan goes along with, from what Daddy's speaking of, from generally speaking, the UK government and into the judiciary aspects of that, then that would be a twofold, right, approach to tackling the central banks, both from the US and from the English perspective. Because now you got the two prominent economic powers pushing against the centralized approach. Right?
Right. Yeah, because we know what has to happen, right? We know the Fed has got to get neutralized, or as Q has said, it's going to get restructured. Now, is that misinformation, disinformation? Is the Fed going to go away? We'll have to see. But Fed is closely tied to London. London is the financial district of the three parts of the heads of the snake, if you want to call it that, the DC, London, Vatican snake, whatever way you want to look at it. So I think they have to work more or less in concert. That in turn would lay the groundwork for the what we would call the global currency reset, which we would likely see China and Russia and us and whoever else who have the gold would have gold-backed currencies at that point. How long is that going to take for all this to get rolled out? Well, is it all going to start the ball rolling here? I think it's been rolling behind the scenes for quite a long time. I think that the stuff that's going on today with Brexit and the Brexit party, the vote, D-class, all that stuff is the groundwork that was being laid to get us to that point, and then boom, that snowball starts rolling downhill awful doggone fast.
I agree.
Yeah, you take the financial arm out of it, and it all implodes.
Right. And so all this crap that you see about, Maxine Waters going after POTUS for financial records, all that stuff right now is just smoke and mirrors and garbage. They will have no leg to stand on whatsoever when we have a defunct currency. All this garbage with the think tanks and everything else, fomenting war, all these things are going to come to a very abrupt end.